89-year-old man faces humiliation after requesting a simple sandwich at Café. The smell of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the low hum of chatter inside the small downtown cafe. It was an ordinary morning until the door swung open, letting in a biting draft of cold air. Heads turned to see an elderly black man step in, his thin frame shivering from the chill. His coat was threadbare, and his shoes, almost worn through, barely covered his feet. Elijah, 89 years old, was a man shaped by years of hardship. His back bent under the weight of a long life, but his spirit, though battered, had not yet broken. With trembling hands, he approached the counter, clutching a few crumpled bills and coins. "I'd like a sandwich," he said softly, his voice barely audible. At the counter stood Marianne, the cafe owner. She was a middle-aged white woman with a stern face and sharp blue eyes. Marianne looked him over with clear disdain, her lips curling into a sneer. "This isn't a soup kitchen," she snapped. "If you don't have enough money, don't waste my time." Elijah's shoulders slumped. He had hoped for kindness but found humiliation instead. The other patrons whispered among themselves, their murmurs filling the air with judgment. A few chuckled under their breath, but no one stepped forward to help. Suddenly, amidst the uncomfortable scene, the door opened again. A tall, elegant woman with a commanding presence entered. Naomi, dressed in a sleek coat and carrying a designer bag, was instantly recognizable. A successful businesswoman known for her philanthropy, she often frequented the cafe. She scanned the room, her eyes narrowing as they landed on Elijah. Then, her gaze dropped to his wrist. Naomi froze, her heart pounding as she recognized the old, tarnished watch he wore. Without hesitation, she strode toward the counter, her voice ringing out like a bell. "What's going on here?" Marianne stiffened, her confidence wavering under Naomi's intense glare. The cafe grew silent, and all eyes turned to the confrontation unfolding before them. Naomi stood tall and unyielding before the counter, her presence commanding the room. "Why is this man being treated like this?" she asked, her tone firm. Marianne crossed her arms defensively. "He can't pay. We're not here to hand out freebies." Naomi's dark eyes bore into Marianne's. "And yet, you're here humiliating him instead of treating him like a human being." Elijah looked up at Naomi, his expression a mixture of confusion and gratitude. He tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. "I'll cover whatever he wants," Naomi said, her voice steady. "Serve him now." Marian hesitated, her face reddening. "This isn't your place to dictate my business. And it's not your place to treat people with cruelty," Naomi retorted. "Now, either you serve him, or I make sure everyone in this city knows how you run this place." The cafe fell into an uneasy silence. The patrons watched, some now squirming in their seats, guilt flickering across their faces. Finally, Marian grabbed a plate and slapped together a sandwich. She shoved it across the counter with an exaggerated sigh. "There, happy." Marianne muttered. Naomi ignored her and turned to Elijah with a kind smile. "Come, let's find a seat," she said gently. She guided him to a table in the corner, away from prying eyes. As he sat down, she noticed again the watch on his wrist. It was old and scratched, but unmistakably familiar. "That's a beautiful watch," Naomi said softly. "Where did you get it?" Elijah looked at it fondly, his weathered fingers brushing against the worn leather strap. "It was my son's," he said. He passed away many years ago." Naomi's breath caught in her throat. She reached out, her fingers trembling as she gently turned the watch over. The engraving on the back confirmed her worst fears. The name carved into the metal was Malcolm. Her heart sank. That watch had once belonged to the man she had loved more than life itself. Naomi stared at the watch, her mind racing with memories she had tried to bury. Malcolm. The name on the watch belonged to the man she had loved and lost years ago. She looked at Elijah, her voice trembling. "Malcolm, he was your son?" she asked. Elijah nodded, his eyes glistening with tears. "Yes, he was my boy, the brightest light in my life." Naomi swallowed hard. "I loved him," she whispered. "He meant everything to me. Elijah's hands trembled as he tried to process her words. You knew my Malcolm? I did, Naomi said, her voice breaking. We were young and in love. But then she couldn't finish the sentence, the pain still too raw. Elijah nodded solemnly. He always spoke of someone, a woman he loved deeply but couldn't stay with because he paused, his voice filled with regret. Because of his family. My wife, Clara, never approved. She wanted him to marry someone from our community. Naomi closed her eyes, the memories flooding back. Clara's disapproval had been a constant shadow over their relationship. Malcolm had tried to balance his family's expectations with his own desires, but it had torn him apart. I didn't know he had passed, Naomi said, tears streaming down her face. I always hoped he was out there, happy, living his life. Elijah reached across the table, his frail hand covering hers. He loved you, Naomi. He never stopped loving you. For the first time in years, Naomi allowed herself to cry openly. In that small cafe, surrounded by strangers, two people bound by their love for Malcolm began to share their grief and memories. The cafe grew quieter as Elijah and Naomi continued their conversation, each word unraveling layers of pain and love shared for Malcolm. Naomi listened intently as Elijah recounted his son's dreams of becoming a writer and his struggle to navigate the pressures of pleasing his family while pursuing his own happiness. He had such a bright smile, Elijah said softly, his eyes distant. Even when life was hard, Malcolm always found a way to make us laugh. He wanted to change the world, one story at a time. Naomi nodded, tears streaming freely now. He used to talk about writing a novel, one that captured the beauty and complexity of our lives. I remember the way his eyes would light up when he shared his ideas. He had so much passion. Elijah sighed, the weight of years pressing down on his frail shoulders. But we never made it easy for him, Naomi. My wife, Clara, especially. She thought your love was a distraction, something that would keep him from achieving what she thought was his potential. I went along with it, and I regret that every single day. Naomi placed her hand over his trembling one, her touch warm and understanding. We all made mistakes, Elijah. Malcolm's love for you and Clara never wavered, even when things got difficult. He always spoke about wanting to make you proud. Elijah's voice cracked. He did make me proud, but I never told him enough. As they sat in silence for a moment, Naomi made a decision. Elijah, she began, her voice steady despite the emotions swirling within her. I want to help you. And Clara too. Where is she now? Elijah hesitated, his face shadowed with sadness. She's waiting for me in the park. We've been living on the streets for years, moving from place to place. It's been hard for both of us, but we didn't have anywhere else to go. Naomi's heart ached. The thought of Malcolm's parents, once so full of life, reduced to struggling for survival, was unbearable. Then let's go to her, she said firmly. This ends today. You both deserve better. Elijah looked at her with a mix of gratitude and uncertainty. You'd really help us after everything? Naomi nodded, determination lighting her face. Malcolm would have wanted this. Let me do this for him, for all of us. Naomi and Elijah walked through the bustling streets of the city toward the small park where Clara waited. The chilly wind bit at their skin, but Naomi's resolve kept her warm. When they reached the park, Naomi spotted Clara sitting under a bare tree, her frail figure wrapped in a tattered coat. She was hunched over, clutching a small bag, her face lined with years of hardship and grief. Elijah approached her slowly. Clara, he said softly. She looked up, her eyes narrowing when she saw Naomi. Who's this? She asked, her voice hoarse but laced with suspicion. This is Naomi, Elijah explained gently. She was important to Malcolm. Clara stiffened, her face hardening. Naomi, she repeated, her tone sharp. You're the one who took him away from us. Naomi took a deep breath, willing herself to remain calm. Clara, I understand your anger, she said softly. But I didn't take him away. I loved him, and he loved you too. He always wanted to be the son you could be proud of. Clara's hands trembled as she gripped her bag tighter. We lost everything because of him, because of you, she said, her voice cracking. I'll never forgive you for that. Elijah knelt beside her, taking her hands in his. Clara, please. We've suffered for so long. Maybe it's time to let go of the past. Naomi wants to help us. Clara shook her head, tears streaming down her face. Help us? After all these years? Why now? Naomi stepped closer, her voice steady but filled with emotion. Because Malcolm wouldn't want to see you like this. He wouldn't want this pain to define your lives. Let me help you find peace, for his sake. Clara hesitated, the anger in her eyes wavering. Slowly, she looked at Elijah, then back at Naomi. I don't know if I can trust you, she admitted. You don't have to trust me right away, Naomi replied. But let me show you that I mean what I say. Let's take it one step at a time. After a long pause, Clara nodded reluctantly. All right, she said quietly. But only for Malcolm. Naomi smiled gently. That's all I ask. Back at her home, Naomi welcomed Elijah and Clara inside. The warmth of the space was a stark contrast to the cold streets they had left behind. Clara hesitated at the door, her pride battling her exhaustion, but Elijah gently urged her forward. This is your home now, Naomi said, her voice warm and inviting. For as long as you need it. Elijah looked around, his eyes wide with disbelief. This is more than we could have ever dreamed, he murmured. Naomi helped them settle into a guest room, providing fresh clothes and a hot meal. For the first time in years, Elijah and Clara slept on a bed, their weariness giving way to the possibility of hope. In the coming days, Naomi began helping them rebuild their lives, starting with visits to community support centers and reconnecting them with resources. The process was slow and often met with resistance, particularly from Clara, but Naomi's patience never wavered. As days turned into weeks, a fragile sense of trust began to grow between them. Elijah opened up more, sharing stories of his and Clara's life before their hardships. Clara, though still guarded, began to soften, finding comfort in Naomi's unwavering kindness. One afternoon, as they sat together in the living room, Elijah looked at Naomi with gratitude. You've given us more than just a roof, he said. You've given us hope. Naomi smiled, her heart full. You've given me hope too, she replied. Malcolm's legacy lives on in both of you, and in what we're building together. The days passed, bringing a rhythm of quiet renewal to Naomi's home. Elijah adjusted quickly, embracing the stability of having a roof over his head and the warmth of regular meals. Clara, however, remained distant. She often sat by the window, gazing outside, as if the world beyond held answers to questions she couldn't voice. One evening, as the sun set and bathed the room in golden light, Naomi approached Clara with a steaming cup of tea. She hesitated for a moment before sitting beside her on the couch. I know this hasn't been easy for you, Naomi began softly. And I can't imagine the pain you've been carrying all these years. Clara didn't respond at first, her fingers tightening around the frayed edges of her shawl. Finally, she sighed, her voice low and heavy. I blamed you for everything. When we lost Malcolm, I needed someone to blame. I thought if I could focus my anger on you, it would make the pain easier to bear. Naomi nodded, her expression calm and understanding. I understand why you felt that way. I've carried my own guilt, wondering if I could have done something different, if I could have saved him. Clara's head turned sharply, her tired eyes meeting Naomi's. For the first time, her gaze softened. I didn't know you felt that way, she said quietly. How could I not? Naomi replied, her voice trembling. He was my whole world. Losing him left a void I thought would never heal. But seeing you and Elijah, I realized something. He didn't just belong to me. He belonged to all of us. Clara's hands trembled as she wiped away a tear. I've spent so long clinging to my anger. I forgot how much I loved him. He was everything to us, and I pushed him away because of my pride. Naomi reached out, gently placing her hand over Clara's. It's not too late to let that go. We can't change the past, but we can honor his memory by finding peace with each other. For a long moment, Clara remained silent. Then, with a shaky breath, she nodded. Maybe it's time I try. It was a small step, but it marked the beginning of a shift. The walls Clara had built around her heart began to crack, allowing light to seep through. Encouraged by Clara's willingness to move forward, Naomi suggested they start looking for a place of their own. Elijah was thrilled by the idea, but Clara hesitated, her anxiety evident. "Are you sure we're ready?" Clara asked one afternoon as Naomi shared listings of affordable housing. Naomi smiled reassuringly. "It's a big step, but you'll have my support every step of the way. You deserve a place to call your own, where you can build new memories." Elijah chimed in, his voice filled with quiet determination. "Clara, we've been through so much. This could be our chance to start fresh, to live with dignity again." After several weeks of searching, they found a small house on the edge of a quiet neighborhood. It was modest but cozy, with a small garden in the back. The moment Clara stepped inside, something shifted in her expression. She ran her hand along the worn wooden banister of the staircase and smiled faintly. "This could be home," she said softly. Naomi helped them move in, ensuring every detail was perfect. The first night in their new home was a quiet celebration. They sat around the small dining table, sharing a simple meal, the air filled with a sense of hope. "We never thought we'd have this again," Elijah said, his voice thick with emotion. "Naomi, you've given us more than we could ever repay." "You've given me something too," Naomi replied. "A reminder that love and forgiveness are stronger than anything life can throw at us." Clara, for the first time, smiled warmly at Naomi. "Maybe you were meant to come back into our lives, after all." Weeks turned into months, and Elijah and Clara began to settle into their new lives. The house became a sanctuary, filled with the quiet joys of shared meals and long walks in the nearby park. Naomi visited often, her presence bringing warmth and laughter. One Sunday afternoon, Naomi invited them to her home for a special gathering. As Elijah and Clara arrived, they were greeted by a young man with a bright smile and kind eyes. "This is my son, Daniel," Naomi said, her voice filled with pride. "He's been away at university, but I wanted him to meet you." Daniel extended his hand to Elijah and Clara. "It's an honor to meet you both," he said warmly. Elijah shook his hand firmly, a broad smile lighting up his face. "You remind me of someone," he said, his voice tinged with nostalgia. The day was filled with laughter and conversation. Daniel listened intently as Elijah shared stories of Malcolm, his words bringing a vivid picture of the man he had been. Clara, though quieter, found herself smiling as Daniel spoke about his studies and plans for the future. As the sun set, the four of them sat in Naomi's garden, the air filled with the sweet scent of blooming flowers. For the first time, Clara leaned back and sighed contentedly. "This feels like family," she said softly. Naomi's eyes welled with tears. "It is family," she replied. Months turned into a year, and the bonds between Naomi, Elijah, Clara, and Daniel grew stronger. Elijah and Clara thrived in their new home, finding joy in the simple pleasures of life. Naomi continued to visit, her heart full every time she saw the peace they had found. One sunny afternoon, they all gathered at the park near Elijah and Clara's home. As they sat on a bench overlooking the lake, Elijah spoke, his voice steady and full of gratitude. "Malcolm may not be here with us, but his love brought us together," he said. "Through him, we've found a way to heal." Clara nodded, her hand resting on Elijah's. "He taught us that love doesn't end, it transforms. And now, we carry that love forward." Naomi looked at Daniel, who smiled at her with quiet pride. She knew that Malcolm's legacy lived on, not just in their memories, but in the new connections they had forged. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the park in a golden glow, they sat together, a family born from love, loss, and the courage to forgive. Their journey had been painful, but it had brought them to a place of peace. And in that moment, they knew they were ready to face the future together. Thank you so much for watching this story. If you found it meaningful or thought-provoking, don't forget to like the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more stories like this. Your support helps us continue sharing these important moments. See you next time.